you going to class or walking around campus at school? Has that changed dramatically for you?
Oh, same thing. Except now when I'm riding my bike to class, every so often I hear somebody yell, "It's Sam Sulek!" I like turn around, try not to crash while I wave at them.
Do you find that you've done a good job surrounding yourself with people that don't allow you to get away with anything just because of what's happening? You know what I mean? They keep you grounded, and they make sure you know your first name's still just Sam.
Yeah, of course. I mean, honestly, like I was saying before, all my same friends are the same friends. Everybody I lift with are the same dudes. I'm still having to grab 225 off of somebody who overestimated their strength. I'm just a normal lifter. I just happen to record it.
What about when you travel? Do you get recognized now by like the customs guys and the airline security and like all that weird stuff that starts to happen? How's it going for you?
Yeah, it's cool. It's I went to the state fair. You go through security and I hear a state trooper, super serious. He just yells my name. I thought I was about to get in trouble, but he's like, "Oh, everybody at the station loves your videos." So hopefully if I ever get pulled over, maybe they'll recognize me and I can get a pass.
It'll come in handy someday for sure.
Yeah, a little bit of special treatment.
Can you tell us about, you meet a lot of fans, obviously. You've done some insane meet and greets at the stores. I've seen some of the crowds of people that show up for you. Can you give us a story of someone that expressed how you've helped them inadvertently? Because I know that you're hearing that stuff. What's some of the stuff that you've heard from people that you're like, wow, I did not intend for any of that to ever happen, but it's amazing,
People doing their cardio is what it is.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I'm gonna say. Honestly, I probably make about 3 main points in almost every video. All right, you should be doing hard sets, you should be doing your daily cardio and tracking your macros. Nobody talks about tracking their macros. Everybody that I met so far at the expo, no one said they're tracking their carbs and fats and proteins yet. So maybe I got to start talking about that more. But I love hearing the ones that especially stick out for me are the guys where they show me before and after picture. They say they're down 100 pounds over the last year because they get to watch my videos when they do cardio. I'm like, oh my God, that's freaking great. That's a huge step. So that's always super hard.
How does it feel to show up in some of the funniest memes that have been on Instagram in like the last year? Like the one of you at the funeral posing your legs, and then the one at Thanksgiving dinner talking about your pump. I mean, those sorts of memes, like people are making that stuff, and you must just be dying in your car.
Oh yeah, I love it. My Instagram and my TikTok, the reels are all full of the Sam edits. You know what I think it probably is? The fact that there's just hours upon hours of videos coming out every day. There's got to be some funny moments that people find. But yeah, I love them.
No, I got to ask, obviously you inspire so many, guys and girls, across such a large, group of ages. Who was it when you were starting in this? Was there anyone that you watched that you're like, emulated the training? Obviously you're known for your very intense, hard, heavy style of training. Who was it that you were looking up to when you got into this that you were like, this is the style that I want to emulate. This is the kind of physique I want to have.
Yeah, so for me, when I started working out, I was a little bit behind like the Jeff Side, Ziz era. So for me, the bodybuilder that I loved watching was Callum von Moger. Massive, funny, throwing around a ton of weight. So he's just one guy I think I wanted to emulate. And then in terms of actually learning how to work out, because if you're a beginner, you don't really know what you're doing yet. What does reps in reserve even mean? What's a good workout split? I was watching a ton of Jeff Nippard videos. I'm sure we've all watched a cumulative 1,000,000 hours of Athlean X, how to do a supinated curl correctly or whatever. But yeah, I'd say probably those two are sort of the main guys I was interested in. And then eventually, once you sort of develop your own routine, you kind of just start seeing everybody all over.
Who are some of the guys that have come up to you, excited to meet you, and you're thinking, I'm supposed to be excited to meet you, and you're coming to meet me? You know what I mean? Can you give us an example of someone that came to meet you and you were like, whoa?
Well, honestly, I feel like everybody who's really kind of like high up on the social media chain or whatever, because that is a big part of what's keeping, one guy out on walking around and one guy in a booth. They're all kind of busy. But it was like 2 nights ago. I saw Lex Little walking away in the hallway, so I run up to him, asking if I can get a picture, just kind of jokingly. But yeah, it's crazy that, I mean, I'll see a Chris Bumstead video where he's talking to Urs, and they bring my name up, so it's still super surreal.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people here want to know, obviously you've been working very hard on building, a high-level physique. When does Sam plan to step on stage, if ever, and in what class would you want to step on stage?
Yeah, so the plan is going to be classic. I keep hearing words of trying to gain weight into open, but you got to remember, a real open bodybuilder, that's a lot of mass, and I think I'm kind of big, but when I train with him, I'm like, oh, geez, I got some room to grow. So I think the plan at first is going to be classic, but if I get big enough that I don't fit the weight class, then just move up. You got to remember, there is absolutely no way imaginable that in my vocabulary I'm going to say, oh, I'm too big. That's just not even possible. But probably within year and a half, we'll just kind of have to see.
Now, you're obviously doing very well for yourself. Everyone knows how many views you have on your channel and how many followers. And we all understand that there's a lot of financial benefits that come with your level of success at this age. But like Ian asked you, you're still in school. You're still doing your thing. You still have a plan. How do you stay focused on those goals with the kind of distractions that come along with this type of success?
Oh yeah, I could definitely see that happening. I mean, I don't want to like name drop anyone, but a lot of other kind of guys my age who, when they sort of start to pop off social media wise, instantly drop out of school. I think the main part for me was I was already in my senior year of college. So if you're nearly done, you may as well finish it. But you got to remember, even though I'm making these videos all the time, it's just a 1 hour portion of the day of the workout. It's the same as what I was doing before, the same as what we're all doing. So it's not like a huge life-changing thing, at least in terms of the schedule.
I also, I noticed that you really stay Sam in a lot of other ways too. Like you've got sponsors, you're successful with that, but he's still got his favorite hat on. You're still wearing your favorite hat. You still got the blue bomber jacket that you wear around. What does that mean to you?
Honestly, I think it might just be my own kind of personal preference. Like, if I find a pair of jeans or a jacket or a shoe I like, what's the point of getting something extra fancy if I know this is already what I'm into? And in terms of the hat, it's not like I see this plain blue hat and I go, oh my God, that looks so good. Really, I think I've kind of got a big head. I went on a whole trip. This is a whole day process. I'm like, okay, I want to go buy a hat that just actually fits me. Because if it's too small, every time I lean back to do incline bench or anything, it just falls off. So this one's just big enough that I can actually grab onto my noggin.
It's that hair.
I think the hair may play a factor.
Take a big head and then add the hair, and you need a certain type of hat. I can see how that would be a problem. What about attending the shows and going and watching these top-level bodybuilding contests? You've obviously got the odd person tapping you on the shoulder and stuff like that. But, how is it to attend them? You wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for the videos. You'd be just kind of waiting for your next class.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? So that sort of stuff, what other things are just the best benefits of all of this?
The best benefits, I'd say the one that I run into the most part, and the social media side may have something to do with it, but anybody who reaches a certain size, whenever you go to a Chipotle and the guy making your food is into the gym as well, he's gonna fill up your burrito or your
double
tacos.
Protein. Yeah.
I have definitely noticed a positive lifter bias on getting some pretty full portions. Honestly, to the point where it's kind of a mess. Like I can't even, I'll pick up a taco, but I'm just spilling it everywhere. That's probably one of the most notable benefits.
Now, you have a large fan base that's younger guys. What's a few pieces of advice you'd give them, whether it's pertaining to diet, training? Let's just get a couple top 3 bullet points on things you're like, these are the things that I think are the biggest keys that have made my physique improve as fast as it has.
Oh yeah, sure. I'd say, just sort of looking back, because I didn't start, 5 years ago lifting, tracking every calorie every day, and doing this really specific workout split, or even knowing what I was really doing at all. In the beginning, there's kind of a few important steps that I'd recommend sort of going through, because nobody's going to go from eating whatever they want not even thinking about it, to plugging in every calorie into your phone. So I'd say the beginner, most important calorie-wise or diet-wise, would be just making sure you hit your gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. That's the only thing I was focused on at the beginning. And then training-wise, I mean, just kind of stick to the basics, you know? There's nothing extra fancy about going to failure on a set of dumbbell curls. Just make sure your form is, you know, reasonable. I'm not necessarily the biggest proprietor of like perfect form, but as long as you do a good set, I think you're all right.
Do you think when it comes to training, a lot of the people, especially the younger guys that are, you know, coming to you with questions, they're sort of stepping over dollars to pick up pennies with a lot of the little details they're worried about?
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. If you want to go to the gym and get the best results that you can, you would want to try to do every set absolutely perfectly and stimulate every fiber in the most scientifically backed way. But just by thinking about it with such a complex thought process, you totally lose in sight of the fact that all you have to do is get really hyped up to, you know, a Metallica song and just go crazy. You know, I think the guy, I always make this analogy, a kind of nerdier guy doing a perfect set of 3 reps in reserve, supinated curls, he's never going to build the same biceps as like a farmer kid who goes into the gym and tries to curl as heavy as possible for 8 reps.
And just the sheer effort, focusing on effort and intensity.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you should work smart, but in terms of weightlifting, I think it's probably more important to work hard first. And once you get that intensity down, you know, then you can start to optimize. I think that's where a lot of like science-based lifting tips come into play, because you wouldn't want to be teaching some kid who's interested in like go-karting about understeer or something really tiny and barely specific that you don't even know about. And you want to start with the basics first and make the tips gradually more specific over time. So if I was a beginner and I watched a lot of the videos out about training now, I'm sure I'd be doing all sorts of stupid stuff.
What about your family? How do they, you know, when you go on these trips and react to your success? You know, they're obviously supportive and stuff. Well, you know, how do they take this all in?
Yeah, so they don't really get to see it in person as much. Obviously, I'm going to be the one who gets to see every crowd like this and is, you know, spoiled by a huge audience. But they came to the last Arnold Expo, and they were just like blown away. My little brother came with me too, and I don't want to say it's like it's kind of a skill to not get like super stage frighty, because I mean, this is freaking crazy. Look at this crowd. But over time, you get more exposed to it. But my younger brother kept getting bombarded with questions. He was getting kind of nervous.
Now, I saw you at the gym the other night. You stopped in at Dino's, where we always train. And I mean, that's just one example of a gym giving you like a really great reception. Have you had that type of reception at a bunch of other gyms too?
Yeah. It's mainly gyms that I don't go to on a consistent basis. Or if I ever visit, you know, that's when there will be, you know, kind of more of a sort of a jump, like, holy crap, I would never expect Sam to be in Colorado or in, you know, Birmingham or anything like that. But yeah, I love it. I feel super spoiled now because no matter what gym I go to, I always get special treatment.
A little bit of feedback there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right?
Now, talking about training, you know, you obviously train in a very specific style. Like we were talking, the heavier weights, you know, focused on intensity. Let's get your Mount Rushmore of if you could line up to, you know, film some videos with a couple guys. They don't have to be bodybuilders. They could be social media guys. You know, they could be the Branch Warrens of the world, whoever it is. If you could get a workout and just get absolutely demolished by someone, give us a couple names. Who would you love to train with?
Oh, a couple of workouts. I'll kind of combine them. Of course, I would love a pose down with Chris Bumstead, fully pumped, purely just to get mogged. But honestly, I think that's the sort of stuff which really makes you get hyped up.
I think that would get a lot of views.
I think so.
Yeah.
So, you know, characters like that, Wesley, but I'd love to have Tom Platz behind me just screaming at me on a set of squats. I'm sure that would be one of my hardest sets ever. And then, same thing with Dorian Yates. That'd be great.
Where do you think you're I mean, you just mentioned Tom Platz and Dorian Yates, and I'm a heck of a lot older than you, and those were my role models.
Yeah.
So what is it about kind of that old school that has gotten, like, You know, how did that get into you? Was that a magazine when you were 14? Like, do you remember when you kind of took to that old school vibe?
Yeah, it must have been kind of early in the training, but not from any magazines. It was this YouTube channel. It's just a compilation of real, like, motivational videos like that, real serious, kind of somber music. But I think with guys like that, they're, I don't want to say unapologetic, but they're very honest about how, you know, they're obsessed with the gym. Like, the people that I like the most and that I can resonate the most are the guys who I know if there was no camera, if there was no expos, they would still be, you know, trying to squat until their nose bled or throw around as much weight as possible and go hard. And guys like them, that's who I sort of pick up from.
Have you ever had, you know, when people come up to you in the gym and say that they're inspired to train harder because of you? How many times do you let somebody kind of work in with you?
Oh, well, so I'll say this, and I feel like everybody can kind of agree with it. If you're on a machine and you can just adjust the pin in like 1 second, I've seen 8 people working in on one leg extension at once. It just becomes a real quick in and out. But if you're doing anything with like a barbell and weights, and you're going to be loading and unloading plates, usually that's when I'll say you might have to wait a few minutes.
Now back to training. And I asked you about your kind of Mount Rushmore for people you'd love to train with. Now for all the guys, you know, coming up in training, you got to pick 10 exercises for the rest of your life. This is a popular thing with
the top 10.
The top 10.
Yeah,
Top
exactly.
10.
Let's hear the Samsulek top 10 exercise. You can only pick 10. Where are we going?
Yeah, I feel like I just did this, so I might be saying the same thing over again.
That's okay. New
But
audience.
I might just have to pick one per muscle group, because, you know, any real lifter isn't going to neglect any specific part of their body because they want to get huge all around. But quads, leg extensions, hamstrings, leg curls, chest, incline dumbbell bench, bicep curls, tricep pushdowns, lateral raises, rear lateral raises. What am I missing? Back, lat pull downs, rows.
What kind of rows?
Oh, well, seated cable rows.
Okay.
And I've got room for one more. I'm sure you would expect another actual weightlifting movement, but as important as all those are, that has to be coupled with the cardio bike, the seated cardio bike. That'd be the last one.
He threw the cardio in.
Cardio is number 10.
Highly neglected.
Recumbent bike at that too.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from, the cardio part of the training? Why do you feel that's so beneficial to you and everyone? You advise it to everyone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anybody who's watched the videos know I've gone on like probably 100 rants, and I feel like it's like 2 main points. For one thing, you're just going to be burning more calories every day, so your sort of baseline amount of body fat that you're going to have in your system is going to be lower, and that would make sense. If I'm kind of speaking to maybe the older guys here, but when you were in high school doing 2-a-days at football practice, or football over here, you're probably leaner, right? And it's not because you were eating any worse. If anything, you're eating much worse because you're a lot younger guy. But just being more active, you're going to be leaner. And in training, you're not going to get gassed. I mean, all the videos, I'm pretty out of breath just for being a heavy guy. But if I didn't do my cardio, in between every set of squats, I'd be laying on the ground, passed out, just huffing and puffing.
How long is your rest between sets when you're training hard and heavy like that?
It depends on the muscle group, because something like bicep curls, I can sit down for a minute because it's not so taxing on my whole body to reoxygenate. But with something like squats or really heavy rows, that'll be a few minutes. But it's really just until I feel like I'm ready to go again. If you have a locked rest period of, like, let's say you set a timer for 30 seconds, if you're not fully recovered and you still try to do another set, I'm not inclined to think it's going to be as effective because you're just not physically recovered enough to load the same amount of weight for a similar amount of reps.
Everything that you're saying about training seems to come back to the base point of just trying to make sure you can generate the most workload effort type thing in your workout. You know what I mean? Just that's what it's all focused on, is just you being able to work the hardest.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just the bottom line?
I'd probably say so. It's not like every set you have to feel like you're about to die, but it would just make sense. if you can do bicep curls to the point where you can't physically move your bicep anymore, then that's the end goal. If you stopped at 5 reps and it barely burned, you shouldn't, if you do expect any gains from an easy set like that, I think you may need to do a little bit of a reality check.
Do you think there's a sport that you played or an experience you had when you were younger where you think the desire to work your hardest and find your limit kind of stems from leading into the gym?
I'm not totally sure, because none of the sports that I did as a kid had any real weightlifting. Like I was doing like gymnastics where we're, bouncing around.
And you
doing
were
like
a diver
flips.
too, right?
And diving as well, so diving board into the water. There was no weight training. That sort of stuff is more skill-based. It's not so intense. So really, I couldn't tell you where the weight training part came from.
Maybe just the mental focus side of it all?
I don't know, it could be. I think somewhere deep in maybe my subconscious, I'd probably need a therapist to bring it to the surface. But I must just have some deep set desire to be a freak.
Now, with your videos, you do a lot with your, summer bulk and cut. A lot of them
Yeah.
are focused on the bulk and cut kind of things. When did that start, and where do you kind of draw the lines? I'm like, okay, I'm ready to cut. Okay, I'm ready to bulk. I'm sure there's a lot of young guys out there, and I know even for me personally, I'm sure Ron's got them. I'm sure you get tons of like, I don't know where I'm at right now. Should I be bulking? Should I be cutting? Where do you kind of differentiate between one phase or another, and what's your recommendation to people out there if they are unsure of kind of where they are, in their physique goals, which way they should go?
Yeah, so when it comes for me, I essentially just main gained while I was in high school because I was still doing, diving, gymnastics at the same time. So I don't know if you've ever, let's just say it's not so easy to do a bunch of flips in the air if you're carrying around a bulked amount of body fat and a full stomach of chicken and rice. It's just not practical. So I was main gaining, and then at a relatively lean body weight, I said, okay, I think it's time for a real bulk. Bulked up, and then for me what happens is my appetite must just be a bit low because I can't bulk to the point of like really putting on too much body fat. So my cue to, all right, I'm probably done with the bulk, I gotta start cutting down, is when I just physically can't eat anymore. I get to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm not even freaking hungry. And then combined with that is your weight just plateaus. And now, sure, I could try to eat 7,000 calories in a day. That would be the answer. I would start gaining weight, but I just can't manage it. So after around 4 months or so, I'm like, all right, let's cut down, reset my appetite, see what kind of muscle I built underneath. And then after around 2 months, when I get to the similar, or around a similar body fat percentage as I was at the beginning, then just start a bulk again and kind of repeat the process. So for anybody who's kind of on the fritz about whether they should bulk up or diet down, you've got to make a decision fast. Because I feel like there's a lot of lifters, guys who you see at your gym for years, and they just look the exact same year after year. And I feel like there's two mental sort of battles that go on. People don't want to bulk up because they don't want to lose their abs that they, maybe just barely have. And they're like, oh, I don't want to get fat. They don't understand that that's just kind of a sacrifice to actually putting on more muscle, increasing strength. And then for people who don't want to diet down, they don't want to lose the strength that they have. It kind of sucks to diet. You're going to be hungry. And, they feel like they're going to be flatter and weaker. But you kind of have to take those drawbacks for the actual long-term gain. And, if you can actually deal with that, then you're going to be able to make long-term progress. But if you can't pick one or the other, then for months and years on end, you may just end up being the same guy. And the dudes who maybe start lifting after you, who you sort of, knocked off as kind of like a rookie who's taking your machine, like if you've been going to the same gym for years, you might feel like that. They're going to surpass you because they're willing to, make a lifestyle change and actually, progress in a bulking phase, muscle-wise, and then lean down when they diet. So another thing, people hate bulking in the summertime. Come on. Look, I know it's cool to be extra lean, but let's think a few years ahead. Would you rather be a little bit leaner on spring break or 20 pounds heavier later on?
You seem to be able to just trust your own body's feedback easily, and you don't stress about it, and the feedback your body gives you in the gym and in the mirror. Is that something like, what would you tell those same guys that come to you about the bulk thing, about just thinking for themselves and trusting their body's feedback? You know, everyone's very panicked about the question,
Yeah.
but how do you help them just relax about listening to themselves?
Yeah, so that's one thing too, which the same thing goes for what I was talking about in terms of like beginner advice is, you know, the way that I go about all my training now, it's very intuitive, but it's just, you know, I'm able to kind of do that because you've lifted for long enough. So as a beginner, it's probably going to be in your best interest to ask the big guys at your gym for tips. But the longer that you work out, if you're actually paying attention, you'll start to kind of get in tune with what ends up working for you.
Now, in terms of, we'll pivot back to diet for a second. When you are transferring from these different phases, from the bulks to the cut, and you know, you kind of explain when are the cutoff periods. But when you're transitioning, you know, you don't work with a coach, you're doing this all yourself. What is kind of the number? You said the 1 gram per pound of protein or more. What's the number you're setting when you're doing a cut versus a bulk and say, okay, this is how much I'm going to lower my calories or increase my calories? You know, you've done a hard bulk, 4 months, okay, appetite's tapped out. I'm going to transition to a cut. Where do you go from there? Where's your thinking and your mindset with that?
Yeah, so for me, I do kind of have a specific calorie goals in mind. Like, I know if I'm eating 5,000 calories consistently, I'm going to gain weight. And if I'm eating around 2,500 calories consistently, I'm going to lose weight, you know, mainly body fat. But, you know, who knows where that middle number is? So you can look up online, and this is what I usually say for people who want to start bulking up or dieting down, is you can plug in your age, your height, your weight, your activity level into like an online macro tracker, and it'll kind of tell you how many calories you should be eating to gain weight or to lose weight. Now, of course, it's just a website, so it's not 100% accurate, but it will give you a good basic idea. And honestly, after you start, you know, eating enough food where you can see the scale change, you'll sort of get an idea of how many calories you have to eat to increase your weight and how many you have to limit yourself to start dieting down. So really, you kind of have to read the scale. I've been a little bit lazy about it as of late, but I've got this whole fancy spreadsheet where I step on the scale every day, track it. You know, I can make a little Google graph, like a business presentation, and see a bulk gain and a cut, like slope downward. But I just sort of know that, you know, if I'm eating 2,500 at my body weight, I'm going to lose body fat, and if I'm eating 5,000, I'll gain weight.
Now, when you go from 5,000 to 2,500, that's a pretty harsh change. You know, for a lot of guys, are you finding when you are doing that drastic of a change, you're noticing a decrease in your performance in the gym? And is that like where you're ever, you know, when you make that big drop and you do it for a few days and you notice a regression in your performance, you're like, okay, I want to eat up for a few days? Or do you just ride that out until you get to the level of body fat that you want, your appetite's back, and then go back up again?
Yeah, so my approach is typically a longer bulking period and then a reasonably short dieting period. If I were to try to diet down for an extended amount of time, I would probably ease into the calorie deficit just so, you know, I can avoid, you know, eating away my muscle. Like getting smaller, that's the absolute opposite of my goal. But in just a very short period of, you know, kind of a mini cut, as it were, being in a steep deficit for me, I'm never too concerned. And sure, there's going to be a strength drop. If you go from eating 1,000 carbs per day to 200, you're definitely going to feel it. Like I know I drop down to like, all the weight on all my lifts drops down. But again, that's sort of something I feel is a little bit egocentric, because anybody who wants to get lean, as soon as they can't bench 225 anymore, you got to start bulking up. I can't lose my strength. But you gotta just have to accept it. And it's like, as much as I love the numbers, because if you manage to bench 315 for reps, you're gonna feel pretty cool. But it's not really the point, you know? Even if I can only do 135 for 8 reps and that was my max, I'd still be pushing it just as hard.
I got one more question for you. What is a trait that you really admire in other people when you see it? And you think, I want to do more of that myself?
What is a trait? Ooh, I mean, this is still kind of gym-centered, but it's got to be intensity. And maybe not just intensity, but when you see someone in your gym where when people walk in and see them, their demeanor kind of changes, that's sort of what I look for. Like, I don't know if I could really condense it to one specific point, But when I was a beginner, like a few years into lifting, there was this one guy at my gym, 300 pounds. I have no idea where he is now, but he was massive. And every time he'd walk in, everybody in the gym would get a little bit more serious because they know, like a big dog just walked in, they got to show off because there's no chance he's going to slack off on his sets. So if you see somebody in your gym like that, I think the more you can emulate them, the better.
Well, Sam, I think it's safe to say that you have become that guy for millions of people.
Oh, I love
Everybody, give Sam Sulek a round of applause. Thank him
thanks.
for his time. Arnold UK crowd, Sam, thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming out.